Okay, so this time our topic is all about, of course, theoretical and conceptual framework. Again, before we created our conceptual framework, most commonly, no, our conceptual framework is coming from our theoretical framework, no? And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the terms conceptual framework, no, and theoretical framework are commonly used in referring to the overall structure and the shape of a research project. However, these are the subtle differences between the two. And to give us, no, the differentiation of these two framework, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Helmi Janan Tungpalan, and I'll be discussing the theoretical and conceptual framework. Under theoretical framework, we'll be discussing first is why do we need a theoretical framework and how to write it, structuring the theoretical framework and example of the theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is a foundational review of existing theories that serves as a roadmap for developing the arguments you will use in your own work. So sabi nga ni Sir kanina, it serves as the structure of the research. It is also developed by researchers to explain the phenomena, draw connections, and make predictions. In a theoretical framework, you explain the existing theories that support your research, showing that your work is grounded in established ideas. So in other words, theoretical framework justifies and contextualizes your later research or dissertation. Next is why do we need a theoretical framework? So before we start, sabi nga, most advisors sabi natin, magbasa ng journals, ng articles regarding sa topic natin. So the theoretical framework is our opportunity to present and explain what we've learned and situated within the future research topic. So there's a good chance then na maraming different theories na meron ng already exist. So if especially if the topic is broad. So ang purpose na lang natin is to evaluate, compare, and select the most relevant ones. Next is to how to write a theoretical framework. So first, let's identify the key concepts. Pick out the key terms from your problem statement and research question. So magbibigay tayo ng example dito. Merong isang boutique downtown, so isang small shop. Ang problema nila, many of their online customers do not return to make another purchase or subsequent purchase. So ang gusto ni management, mag-increase ang kanyang customer loyalty, and naniniwala sila na that ay improved customer satisfaction will play a major role in achieving their goal, which is the increase of return customers. So dito kailangan natin i-identify and plan to focus on the problem statement, objective, and the research question. So ano nga ba yung problem sa sinabi kong example? The problem is many online customers do not return to make subsequent purchase. So na-identify na natin ano yung problem sa example. Next is anong objective ang gustong gawin ni management. Gusto ni management is to increase the quantity of return customers. And it will lead to our research question of how can the satisfaction of boutiques online customers be improved in order to increase the quantity of return customers. So dito, nag-centralize tayo sa concepts na customer loyalty and customer satisfaction along with the relationship to the likelihood that the customer will return. So in our theoretical framework, this should be defined as concepts and discuss the theories about the relationship with these variables. Next is to evaluate and explain relevant events. By conducting a thorough literature review, you can determine how other researchers have defined these key concepts and drawn connections between them. So, ang aim natin sa theoretical framework is to compare and critically evaluate the approaches that different authors have taken. So, pwede, after natin mag-discuss ng different models and theories na mga nabasa natin through journals and articles, we can now establish our own definitions that best fit the research and justify why. Pwede rin tayong mag-combine ng other theories and build our own unique framework if this better suits our topic. Third one is show how your research fits into existing research. So, apart from summarizing and discussing yung mga existing theories natin, our theoretical framework should show how our project will make use of these ideas and take them step further. Next is structuring your theoretical framework. So, meron a theoretical framework can sometimes be integrated into a literature review chapter, but it can also be included as its own chapter or section in our dissertation or research. So, the most important thing is to create a clear and logical structure. So, here's three ways to do this. First is to draw on your research questions, structuring each section around a question or key concept. Next is to organize by theory cluster, and the third one is to organize by date. So, structuring our theoretical framework. So, syempre, nagbe-base lang din tayo sa mga nabasa natin journals and articles. So, we have to make sure to properly cite our sources to avoid plagiarism. Next is conceptual framework. A conceptual framework illustrates the expected relationship between your variables. It also defines the relevant objectives for your research process and maps out how they come together to draw coherent conclusions. So, a conceptual framework is the representation of the relationship we expect to see between our variables or the characteristics or properties that we want to study. Yeah, conceptual frameworks are also often represented in a visual format and illustrate cause and effect relationships. Next is developing a conceptual framework. So first, let's choose our research question. The research question guides your work by determining exactly what you want to find out, giving your research process a clear focus. So, bigyan tayo ng example dito. Example, gusto natin pag-aralan whether the students who study more arts get a higher exam scores. So, to investigate this question, we can use methods such as experiment or survey to test the relationship between the two variables. Next is to select your independent and dependent variables. So, in order to move forward with your research questions and test the cause and effect relationship, you must first identify at least two key variables, the independent and dependent variables. Example, ang independent variable natin from sa example natin kanina, which is the hours of study. It is the expected cost or the predictor or explanatory variable. The expected effect, which is the dependent variable, is the exam score. It is the response or the outcome variable. So mamaya, later on i-discuss natin clearly yan. In other words, we suspect that the exam score depends on the hours of study. So our hypothesis will be that the more hours a student studies, the better they will do on the exam. Next is the visualize your cause and effect relationship. Now that we've figured out your research questions and variables, the first step in designing your conceptual framework is visualizing your expected cause and effect relationship. So usually, the cause and effect relationship it is demonstrated using basic design components of boxes and arrow. So yan, ganito lang itsura niya. Dito makikita natin kanina sa example, the independent variable which is the hours of study points out an arrow to the dependent variable which is the exam score. Next is to identify other influencing variables. So it's crucial to identify other variables that can influence the relationship between your independent and the dependent variable early in your research process. So meron tayong tatlong common variables to include. These are moderating variables, mediating variables, and control variables. So The moderating variables, or also called as moderators, alter the effect that an independent variable has on the dependent variable. So in other words, can change the effect component of the cause and effect relationship. Example, yan, naglagay na tayo ng moderator variable. Kanina, ang gusto lang natin pag-aralan is the more you prepare, the higher your score will be, which is the independent variable and the dependent variable. But now, naglagay na tayo ng moderator variable, which is the IQ. So, we expect that the IQ moderator moderates the effect that the number of study hours has on the exam score. So, to further explain, meron tayong graph dito. Sa first graph, makikita natin the initial study lang natin, the hours of study, the effects of hours of study on exam score of a student. Then sa second graph, makikita natin, naglagay na tayo ng IQ moderator of 120. So, a student with this IQ, for example, IQ of 120, will achieve a perfect score just after 15 hours of study. So, nakita natin yung difference with ng walang moderating variable sa merong moderating variables, which is the IQ moderator. Next is the mediating variables. Mediating variables link the independent and dependent variables, allowing the relationship between them to be better explained. Ayan, naglagay tayo ng mediator variable, which is the number of practice problems completed. Hours of study impacts the number of practice problems, which in turn impacts the exam score. In this case, the mediator helps explain why studying more hours leads to a higher exam score. So, in a simplest explanation, the more hours a student studies, the more practice problems they will complete. So, the more practice problems they completed, the higher student's exam score will be. So, medyo nakakalito si moderator and mediator variable. So, magbibigay tayo ng difference nila para makita nyo. Simple lang kung ano yung relationship nilang dalawa kay independent variable. So, si moderating variable, hindi siya affected by the independent variable. So, kanina ang moderating variable natin is the IQ. So, for example, no matter how many hours the student mag-study, hindi tataas yung IQ niya. Pero nakaka-affect siya kay dependent variable, which is the exam score. Nagigets po ba? And the mediating variable naman is affected by the independent variable. So it also affects the dependent variable. So both the mediator variable, both siya nakaka-affect kay independent and dependent variable. Last one is the control variables. These are variables that are held constant so that they don't interfere with the result. So, yan, the control variable. So, ang main study lang talaga natin dito, sa example natin, is the hours of study, the effects of hours of study to the exam score. But meron tayong mga control variables like health na kailangan aware din tayo. It's crucial to be aware of as many of them as we can be. So see, it is very possible that if a student feels ill, they will get a lower score on the exam. Pero hindi tayo interested in measuring health outcomes as part of our research dahil hindi yun yung main problem natin. So this makes health a good candidate for a control variable. It can still affect or impact our results, but we aren't interested in studying it. And that's all po. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Madam. No, again, a conceptual framework is like a roadmap for your study. No, it helping you visualize your research project and put it into action. No? It defines the relevant variables for your study and maps now out how they might relate to each other. No? So in a quantitative studies, no, a conceptual framework might be used to determine survey questions or data points or to generate a hypothesis for explanation and predictions. In a qualitative studies, a conceptual framework might be used to provide a working hypothesis or a research questions, no, to identify or explore categories in descriptive research. So our presenter give us some, of course, what do you call this one, a comparison, no, of the conceptual and theoretical framework. So the theoretical framework naman is introduces and describe the theory or concept underpinning that research problem. Let's say, for example, if your proposal is a management practices and you wanted to use TQM, no, total quality management, no. So maybe you could able to adapt 6 Cs, na, yung 6 Cs, na, pwedeng ganon. Or depende kung anong gusto mong gamitin na theoretical framework, no. And theoretical frameworks support research by describing and or drawing from relevant theoretical aspects obtained, of course, in a previous work. So a conceptual framework is more about the approach that a researcher takes in answering a research question. On the other hand, theoretical framework is developed from existing theory or theories. Okay? A conceptual framework is composed of several concepts. No, part of a conceptual framework may include a theoretical framework. So the theoretical framework by itself, one theory alone can serve as a theoretical framework. No, and in of course, constructing a theoretical framework, read and review the literature to identify long-standing themes and the main concerns for the query. You need to list down all construct and variables and consider how the variables are related to a theory. So yun yung sinabi ng ating presenter earlier, no? So I think no, that's it for this ano. But again, it is important to develop these frameworks in the early stages of your study to guide your thinking and enable to visualize linkages between various concepts and theories. No, a framework can make research findings more meaningful, providing a solid foundation for the study. Okay, so I think that's it for the conceptual and theoretical framework.